Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So since we're very close to the end of this section, it's 9 pages, I'm going to do my best to finish it today, so we might just go a little bit longer than we usually do. We're on page 201, section 27, reports of the Prophet's dealings with the angels and the jinn. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. So Qadi Iyad, he says رحمه الله, may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. There are many reports about the Prophet's dealings with the angels ﷺ, and jinn, which is one of his gifts, miracles, and radiant signs. Allah Ta'ala helped him by means of the angels and jinn who obeyed him. Many of his companions saw them. Allah Ta'ala says, if you support one another against him, Allah is his protector and Jibreel. Allah Ta'ala also says, when your Lord revealed to the angels, I am with you, so confirm those who believe. And Allah Ta'ala also says, when you called on your Lord for help, and he responded to you, I will reinforce you with 1,000 angels riding in your rear. Allah Ta'ala also says, and we diverted a group of jinn towards you to listen to the Quran. About the words, he saw one of the greatest signs of his Lord. وَرَأَى مِنْ آيَاتِ رَبِّهِ الْكُبْرَى, Surah Al-Najm. Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhuma said he saw Jibreel. Yani Abdullah bin Mas'ud is commenting on what is the greatest sign that he saw the Prophet ﷺ. He saw Jibreel in his true form, and he had 600 wings. There is a famous tradition about his conversation with Jibreel, Israfil, and other angels, and how he witnessed their great number and the immensity of some of their forms on the night journey. So in Islam, our understanding of the angels, of the malaika, is that the malaika are these ginormous beings, not some kind of chubby kid on like a Hallmark card. That's not the angel. The angel is this mighty, mighty being. And that's enforced by the word, the malak. And in the Arabic language, there is a science called, there is the conjugation of the Arabic words, which is called al-ishtiqaq. And each Arabic word will have a root. Usually it's 3 letters, sometimes it's 4, rare times it's 5, and extreme rare times it's 6. But there's another form of conjugation in the Arabic language called al-ishtiqaq al-kibir, which is to find all of the words that are made up of the same root letters, even if the letters are mixed around. So for example, the malaika, the root word is mim, lam, kaf, malaka. Malaka is also to own. Al-milk, ownership. Al-mulk, kingdom. If you change the letters, you get lakama. Lam, kaf, mi, lakama is to punch. If you change them around, you also get, kalima. The kaf, the lam, and the mim, the words, al-kalima. So in this science of al-ishtiqaq al-kibir, the ulama of language like Ibn al-Jinni and others, they say there is a meaning that encompasses all of those derivatives based on that root. So this root, the mim, the lam, and the kaf, in whichever order they are, as long as it makes an actual word, the base meaning is the meaning of strength and power. Ownership is power, punching is power, the angels are a force of power, the word is a power, so on and so forth. So in the Arab, at the time of the revelation, when a Bedouin Arab or an Arab in Mecca or Medina, they hear the word malaika, they understand, embedded in the meaning is that this is something enormous. عَلَيْهَا مَلَائِكَةٌ شِدَادٌ غِلَاظٌ لَا يَعْصُونَ اللَّهَ مَا أَمَرَهُمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. Allah Ta'ala describes the angels guarding the hellfire, that they are ghilad, that they're large and that they're strong. So this also emphasizes the meaning. And I just wanted to highlight that because when you read that Jibreel had 600 wings, sometimes you can't comprehend that. And that's his natural form. In the other hadith narration, the Prophet ﷺ said when he saw Jibreel alayhi salam, he filled up his entire periphery, so he couldn't see anything else. I mean, if you look straight and you think about everything that's in your periphery of vision, Jibreel took up all of that. He didn't see anything except Jibreel alayhi salam. Okay, continuing with the text. Amongst his companions, meaning the Prophet's companions, ﷺ, there were those who saw them in his presence at different times and places. His companions saw Jibreel in the form of a man who asked questions about Islam and belief. We know the famous hadith of Jibreel that's narrated by Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Ibn Abbas, Usama bin Zayd, and others saw Jibreel in the form of Dihya. Dihya al-Kalbi was one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. He was very handsome and he was one of his ambassadors. So many times Jibreel came in the form looking like Dihya al-Kalbi radiallahu anhu. He was actually the ambassador that was sent to the Romans. Sa'ad saw Jibreel on his right and Mikael on his left as two men wearing white garments. So the angels have the capacity to take different forms, is the idea. One of them saw the unbelievers' heads flying off in battle, but could not see those who struck them. On that day, Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith saw white men on horses suspended between the heaven and the earth. So in the battle of Badr, some of the people of Quraysh and some of the Sahaba, they're going up against an adversary and then they see the man's head get cut off, but they didn't see who did that. Those are the angels. So not always were the angels seen, and sometimes they were seen, sometimes they were not seen. The angels used to shake the hands with Imran ibn Hussein. The Prophet ﷺ showed Jibreel to Hamza in the Kaaba and he fainted, meaning Hamza fainted. Because he was overwhelmed by the sight. Abdullah bin Mas'ud saw the jinn on the night of the jinn. This is the background story of Surah Al-Jinn. And he heard them speak. They resembled the men of Zut, which is tall men of Sudani and Indian extraction. Ibn Sa'd mentioned that when Mus'ab was killed in the battle of Uhud, an angel in his form took up the banner. The Prophet ﷺ told him, "Advance, Mus'ab." The angel told him, "I am not Mus'ab." And then the Prophet ﷺ realized it was an angel. More than one source has mentioned that Umar ibn al-Khattab said, radiallahu anhu, while we were sitting with the Prophet, an old man with a staff in his hand came and greeted the Prophet ﷺ. He returned the greeting and said, "You have the voice of the jinn. Who are you?" And he replied, "I am Hama ibn Haym ibn Laqis ibn Iblis." He mentioned that he had met Nuh and those after him. The Prophet ﷺ taught him some surahs of the Quran. When we used to go to Damascus, there were many ulama who, I never experienced this, but apparently they used to discourse with the jinn, and so I've secondhand experienced some of those things. Al-Waqidi, I have never met the jinn. Al-Waqidi mentioned that when I've met people that I think are satanic, that's different. Shayateen al-ins wal jinn, but I've never met the jinn myself. Al-Waqidi mentioned that when Khalid destroyed Al-Uzza, the false idol, he killed a black woman who came out to him naked with her hair flaying, cutting her down with his sword. The Prophet ﷺ was informed of that and he said that was Al-Uzza. So the story is after the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ sent Khalid ibn al-Walid out with a couple of people. He said, "Go, march this way, you'll find Al-Uzza. Destroy it and come back." So Khalid went and then came back and he said, "I didn't find anything." The Prophet said, No, you'll find it. Just go." So when he went, he found this lady was like naked and she started screaming and it was hysteric. And so it's like this, in the Roman and the Greek tradition, the oracles that they go and there's some type of, thing going on with, usually it's a woman. So it was kind of the same type of thing with some of the pagan beliefs in Arabia. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Yesterday Shaitan rushed up suddenly to interrupt my prayer. Allah Ta'ala gave me power over him and I seized him. I wanted to tie him to one of the pillars of the mosque so that all of you could look at him, but then I remembered the supplication of my brother Sulaiman. O Lord, forgive me and give me a dominion that no one other than me will have." Allah Ta'ala returned him away in humiliation. This too is a vast subject. Section 28 reports about his attributes and the signs of his messengership. The proofs of his prophethood. So one of the sub-subjects that the ulama talk about is Dala'il al-Nubuwwah. What are the proofs of the Prophet's prophethood? Alayhi salatu wasalam. The proofs of his prophet, and so this is just a small section in that larger conversation. The proofs of his prophethood and the signs of his messengership include mutually complementary traditions from the monks, rabbis, and scholars of the people of the book regarding his description, his community, his names, and his signs. The seal between his shoulder blades, in the back of the back, was mentioned. There is the contents of the poems of earlier Unitarians, the poetry of Tubba, Al-Aws ibn Haritha, Ka'b ibn Lu'ay, Sufyan ibn Mujashi, Qus ibn Sa'ida, and what is mentioned about Sayf ibn Dhil Yazin and others. Qadi Iyad rahimahullah, he was very well versed in this field. So he had knowledge of, whether direct knowledge of Hebrew and Syriac and the other language, but he certainly was very well read in the Hebrew Bible and in the Gospels. And in other writings, Qadi Iyad rahimahullah actually, spoke more about the subjects. And I've spoken to you about this before, that our ulama understand many references in other holy books to be references to the Prophet ﷺ. Of course, those other people will negate our interpretation of those verses. That I admit. But there is a discipline of that, and the ulama from the very beginning used to look at these things, and it even occurred the time of the Prophet ﷺ. There is also Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufail, Waraq ibn Nawfal, Athkalan al-Himyari, and the Jewish scholar Shemuel. Now remember that not all of the Sahaba that converted were pagans. Some of them were Jewish and some of them were Christian. And certainly amongst the Tabi'een, there were even more converts from the other Abrahamic faiths. There is what the Torah and the Evangel, or the Gospels I would have translated as, say about the Prophet ﷺ, which has been compiled and clarified by the ulama and transmitted by reliable people who became Muslim. That's what I was trying to say, like Abdullah ibn Salam, the sons of Sa'ya, Ibn Yamim, Mukhayra, Ka'b, and other Jewish scholars who converted, and Christians such as Buhayra, Nestor, from amongst the Ethiopians, the chief of Busra, Daghatir, the bishop of Syria, Al-Jarud, Salman, the Najashi of Ethiopia, the Christians of Ethiopia, the bishops of Najran, and other Christian scholars who converted to Islam. These reports were recognized by Heraclius. So in our context, this is one of the most important stories, is that when the Prophet ﷺ sent a message to Heraclius and Sufyan before he converted, went to intercept that, they had this dialogue, and Heraclius asked the Sahaba about the description of the Prophet ﷺ, and every time he asked a question and the Sahaba answered him, he said, yes, this is correct. And in another narration that's actually found in the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, Heraclius had like a box next to him, and he opened the box and he pulled out like this, papyrus. He says, do you know who this is? And they said, no. He said, this is Adam alayhi salam. And he pulled out another page. He's like, do you know who this is? And they're like, this looks like our prophet. He's like, this is Ibrahim alayhi salam. So there is and Heraclius, if you read about him in Western sources, he was very knowledgeable, theologically knowledgeable. He wasn't just he wasn't just the ruler of the Roman Empire, but he himself was learned. So this is the story that is very important for our purposes, because in our narration of the story, he confirmed the nubuwwah of Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And he said, if what you say is true, then he will own the land that I am standing on now, because they met in Jerusalem. They met in the Levant. That story took place in the Levant. And he said something like along the lines, if I could, I would go all the way to Medina, travel there, and I would wash his feet. So why he didn't go, Allahu Alam. So the point of Heraclius is much more significant for us as modern Muslims than some of the other stories, I think. Anyway, there are these reports were recognized by Heraclius and the Pope of Rome, the leaders of the Christians, Muqawqa' and his venerable companion, Ibn Suriyya and Al-Akhtab and his brother Ka'b ibn Asad, Az-Zubayr ibn Batiya, and other Jewish scholars who were moved by envy and rivalry to remain in misery. And the Jews of Medina knew that a prophet was going to come, and they rejected him for that reason, because they thought that the prophet would be amongst Bani Israel. According to our narrations, There are numerous reports about this. The Jews and Christians were forced to admit the existence of these things he said could be found in their books, describing him and his companions. He used the things that their own scrolls contained as an argument against them. He censored them for altering their books, concealing what the book said, books here meaning their holy books, concealing what the book said and twisting those words in them, which made his affair clear, and he invited them to pray that the liars should be cursed. All of these are references to different stories in the Quran in which the Prophet ﷺ pointed out to the Jews or to the Christians things that are in their own tradition that they were hiding. All of them avoided opposing him and thus having to present what he claimed that their books showed. If they had found that they contained other than what he had said, it would have been far easier for them to present that than to give up their lives and property, have their houses destroyed, and give up the fight. So remember that there's no tradition or story that the Jews and the Christians at the time in Medina, for example, accused the Prophet ﷺ of misinterpreting revelation. So they could have, right? They could have made something like that up and put doubt in the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ. That's why it's one of the proofs of prophethood that never happened. So they just simply fought him. They didn't argue with him theologically. The Prophet told them, as is narrated in the Quran, say, bring the Torah and recite it if you are speaking the truth, which is a very stunning verse, that our Quran says, فَأْتُوا بِالتَّوْرَاةِ وَاتْلُوهَا إِن كُنتُم صَادِقِينَ. Bring the Torah and read it. Show us if what you're saying is true. Let us see what the Holy Book says. There is the warning given about the Prophet ﷺ by the soothsayers like Shafi'a ibn Kulayb, Shiqq, Sath, Sawad ibn Qarib, Khanafir, Af'a of Najran, Jidl ibn Jidl al-Kindi ibn Khalsa al-Dawsi, Sa'ad ibn Bintu Qurayz, and Fatima bint al-Nu'man, and many others. There is what was heard from the idols about his prophethood and the advent of his messengership. There are the unseen voices of the jinn that were heard, and what was heard from the sacrifices made to the idols and from inside the statues. So, the false idols testifying to the oneness of Allah and to the prophecy of Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ. This comes in different traditions. There is the name of the Prophet ﷺ and testimony to his message, which was found written in ancient writings on stones and graves. This is quite famous. It is known that certain people became Muslim for that reason. And this subject is very, very vast, and there are many, many proofs of the Prophet's prophethood, alayhi salatu wasalam. Okay, section 29, what is related about his birth. It is a sunnah and a custom in the Muslim community that when we talk about the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, that we stand up. So for the first few paragraphs, we're going to stand, inshallah, out of respect for Rasulullah ﷺ as we narrate some of the hadith of his blessed birth, alayhi salatu wasalam. So Qadi Iyad, he says, rahimahullah, there are the signs which appeared when he was born and the wonders related by his mother and those present. He lifted his head when he was born, looking skywards, meaning looking up to the heavens. A light issued from him when he was born, alayhi salatu wasalam. Uthman ibn Abi al-As, Uthman ibn Abi al-As saw the stars lowering themselves, and a light appeared when he was born, so that he could see nothing but light. The midwife, Ash-Shifa Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, who was present at the Prophet's birth, said, when he dropped into my hands and sneezed, I heard someone say, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on you, rahimakullah. And the entire horizon was illuminated for me so that I could see the castles of the Greeks. Halima, his wet nurse, and her husband recognized the blessings that came with him and the abundance of her milk for him and the milk of her old she-camel and the fertility of their sheep, the vigor of his youth and the excellence of his growth. Okay, we can sit. The rest of the hadith are hadith when he was younger, alayhi salatu wasalam. There are the wonders that took place the night he was born, when the arcade of Kisra shook, the balconies fell down, the waters of Lake Tiberias ebbed, and the flame of Persia, which had not been put out for 1,000 years, was extinguished. When he ate with his uncle Abu Talib and his family as a child, they always had their fill of food and drink. When he was absent, they ate and were not satisfied. All the sons of Abu Talib got up in the morning disheveled, whereas the Prophet ﷺ was invariably neat, oiled, and wearing kuhl. He was very handsome, alayhi salatu wasalam. His natural state. His nurse, Ayman, said, I never saw him complain of hunger or thirst either as a child or as an adult. She writes, she translates it nurse, but the hamilat, the Arabic is those who held the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So there are those who were present at the birth, there were those who held the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and then there were those who nursed the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So a nurse is okay, but it's more about al-hamilat, those who held the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Another example of what happened is that the heaven was guarded by meteors, thus cutting off the spying of the shaitans and preventing them from listening. Hatred for idols grew naturally in him, and he abstained from the things done in the time of ignorance. Allah Ta'ala protected him, even in keeping his modesty, as in the famous tradition about when the Kaaba was rebuilt and he took off his wrapper and put it around his neck to use for carrying the stones, making himself naked. He didn't. He was going to do that. The translation makes it look like he did not do that, because the Prophet ﷺ never exposed his nakedness ever. He kept on falling down until he's put his wrapper back on. The wrapper here is the izar, which is the waist, what the men wear in the ihram. The izar is what the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba used to wear from the waist down. He kept on falling down until he put his wrapper back on. His uncle asked, what is wrong with you? And he replied, I was stopped from being naked. So you can see the translation is not working, because he never exposed. He was going to do it, and then he passed out. Another example is that he was shaded by clouds when he traveled. All of this is before the Nabuwah, by the way. This is all when he was young. Lady Khadija alayhi salam said when he was approaching, they would see two angels were shading him. She mentioned this to Maysara, one of her relatives, and he told her that he had seen that happening from time to time. They set out with him on their journey. It is related that Halima alayhi salam also saw a cloud shade him when he was with her. Before he was a prophet, on one of his journeys, he alighted under a dry tree. This is the famous tree that I've mentioned that is outside of Amman, Jordan today. All around it became green, and the tree itself became full grown, spread out and lowered its branches for him, for all to see. In some traditions, the shade of the tree inclined towards him to shade him, alayhi salatu wasalam. It is mentioned that he had no shadow in the sun or moon because he was a light. Flies did not alight on his clothes or body. So there is a tradition that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam did not have a shade. He himself had no shade. And then there are other traditions, there are other hadith that say that the Sahaba would be sitting and they would see the shade of the Prophet ﷺ appear before he himself appeared alayhi salatu wasalam. So the ulama, they reconcile this and they say, he has ahwal, he has different states. In some states, the Prophet ﷺ had no shade because he was a light. Allah Ta'ala refers to him as a light in the Quran, وَسِرَاجًا مُنِيرًا. And in other times he had a light. And this is one of the things that Salafis accuse Sufis of, because we say that the Prophet ﷺ had no shade, because we love Rasulullah ﷺ, so we say he has no. And there are traditions that back up both, so there's no need to fight about it. It's just he had different states, different ahwal. Alayhi salatu wasalam. He was made to love withdrawing from the world until the time he was given revelation. He told people about his coming death and its nearness, and where his grave would be in Medina, and that it would be in his house. What is between his house and the mimbar is one of the meadows of the garden. Riyad min Riyad al-Jannah. Allah gave him a choice regarding his death. There are marks of honor and nobility contained in the story of his death, alayhi salatu wasalam. The angels prayed over his body. So the angels prayed the janazah prayer over his body first. The angel of death asked his permission, which he had not done before anyone before him. So he asked his permission to take his soul, alayhi salatu wasalam. There was a call they heard, do not remove the shirt from him until he was washed. So when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the story, obviously it's a big, maybe the most traumatic thing that happened in the history of Islam. And there was a dispute of where do we bury him. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr said, I heard the Prophet ﷺ say that all of the Anbiya are buried where they pass away. So we'll bury him here. And then came the issue of washing his body. So they heard a voice in the room not to remove his qamis, not to remove his clothes, to expose his nakedness, but to wash him as he was ﷺ with the clothes that he was wearing upon his death ﷺ. Actually, our Mashaykh taught us not to say that the Prophet died, but to the Prophet intaqala ila al-rafiq al-a'la. That he did not die, but he moved to al-rafiq al-a'la. There's a double reason for that. One reason for that is it's more adab. But the other real reason is it pisses off the people that get mad when you say that. So, sorry to say, excuse my language. And there's a sunnah in that, in making people upset on purpose. For example, when in Mecca, the Sahaba later in life, they asked Sayyidina Bilal, radiallahu anhu, why were you saying ahadun ahad, ahadun ahad, when they were crushing him? And he said, because this was the word that upset them the most. Right? So he was agitating them even though he was resisting, even though he was being tortured, radiallahu anhu. Anyway, so they heard a voice called, do not remove the shirt from him when he is washed, alayhi salatu wasalam. It is related that Al-Khidr or Al-Khadir and the angels consoled the people of his house when he died. There were the miracles, the blessings of his companions during his life and after his death, alayhi salatu wasalam, like Umar asking for water for his uncle, and the blessings at the hands of more than one of his descendants. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is the concluding, I think we'll finish inshallah. This is the concluding section to the first part of the book. The book is in 4 parts, as we said way back when. So this is the concluding section to this part, inshallah. Section 30, the conclusion and the appendix. This is important because what he's going to talk about in this chapter is he's going to talk about the miracle of the Quran and the different schools of thought amongst the ulama of what is the miracle of the Quran, how is the Quran a miracle, and how do the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ compare with the miracles of the other Anbiya. So this is an important section because this is where Qadi Iyad will flex his scholarly muscles much more than simply narrate as he has been doing up until now. And as I said, Qadi Iyad is a massive faqih, Qadi in the Maliki madhab. So I mean, this is the treat. This is a treat right now, inshallah, to see kind of how he thinks and how he writes. Rahimahullah. In this chapter, we have presented some points about his evidentiary miracles and a summary of the signs of his prophethood. Although mentioning just one of them would have been sufficient, we omitted many others and we condensed some long hadiths to achieve our purpose. We mostly use sound and famous hadiths. Remember I said Qadi Iyad is also a hadith master, so that's why this book is reliable. Even though there are some weak hadith that he uses, but he only uses them as support. He never uses them to make the core argument. Like the hadith about the Prophet ﷺ not having light. I mean, that's not a very sound tradition, but it's a tradition nonetheless. Anyway, we use mostly sound and famous hadiths, although there are a few which are only mentioned by the famous imams. We shorten the isnads, the chain of transmissions, in order to be concise. This subject would require many volumes for a complete register. And as a matter of fact, this book, the Shifa, has many commentaries. And one of my colleagues in Cairo, he's working on coming out with a critical edition of one of the famous commentaries on the Shifa. I think it's like 5 volumes or 6. So it's quite a massive work. The miracles of our Prophet ﷺ are more manifest than the miracles of all of the other messengers in 2 ways. One is their abundance, and in fact that no prophet brought a miracle without our Prophet having something like it or better. So that's one belief that we have, that the miracles of Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ encompass the miracles of the people of the Anbiya before him. And they are more numerous than the other prophets' miracles. Many people have pointed this out. If you wish, you can study the sections of this chapter and the miracles of the previous prophets, and you will discover this to be true, inshallah. As for their being numerous, every bit of the Quran is a miracle. Now, in Usul al-Fiqh, when we come to define the Quran, we say that the Quran is the verses that are in the Mus'haf, beginning with Al-Fatiha and ending with Surah Al-Nas. The smallest verse of it is a decisive miracle. That's part of the technical, I mean, it sounds very clunky to say, but that's part of the technical definition of the Quran. So what that means is every part of the Quran a miracle? So like if you read the word fi in the Quran or man or ila, is that the miracle? So the ulama say, no, the miracle is the shortest verse. You have to have at least one verse. So that's what, I'm just giving you the background so you understand why he's writing the way he's writing. As for there being numerous, the miracles being numerous, every bit of the Quran is a miracle. According to certain imams, the least amount in which the miracle occurs is in the surah, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, or a verse of the same length of that verse, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. So then the minimal amount of the Quran to be established as miraculous and established as a proof is this amount of, I think it's 10 words in the verse, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. Of course, there's a debate amongst usul, but we don't need to concern ourselves with that. Some of them, of these ulama, believe that every verse of it, no matter its size, is a miracle. So, alif lam mim, that would be a miracle. And it is miraculous. I mean, from a point of view that, nobody talked like that in the past. What does that mean, alif lam mim? And I told you guys about the letters. Does anyone remember what I taught you about the letters? The letters that begin the Quranic verses, the surahs? How many are there? All of the surahs that begin with the letters, how many letters of the Arabic alphabet are used to begin the surahs? Alif, Lam, Mim, Qaf, Kaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, Sad, Ha, Mim. Naam? 3. Anybody else? 14. 14. Half of the alphabet. So half of the Arabic alphabet, this is why it's a miraculous, right? Half of the Arabic alphabet make up those letters. And remember I taught you the mnemonic device to remember them? Do you guys remember? You're total darwish. You're just here for the barakah. Nassun hakimun qati'un lahu sir. Nassun hakim, a wise statement, qati'un, absolute. In it is a secret. This is a sentence that's in every single letter of this sentence are all of the letters that make up the beginning letters of the surah of the Quran. So the ulama, they call these letters al-huruf al-nuraniyya, the letters of light, and then the other 14 letters, al-huruf al-dhulmaniyya, the letters of darkness. And subhanallah, there are also 14 expanding phases of the moon. So for the first half of the lunar month, the moon is it waxing or waning? Waxing. Waxing, it's getting bigger. So those are the Nuraniyya days. And then there are 14 of them waning, getting smaller. The Dhulmaniyya, right? So mashallah. So, the Quran is a miracle. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We'll review this when we come to Ramadan. Just remember this, inshallah. There'll be a test in Ramadan, inshallah. And if you fail the test, you're going to have to fast 10 extra days. And then, I'm just kidding. Okay. Bismillah. Some of them believe that every verse of the Quran is a miracle, no matter its size. Others added that every sentence is a miracle, even if it consists of only 1 or 2 words. The truth is in the words of Allah Ta'ala we have already quoted, being a surah like it. فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِثْلِهَا. The surah, in Allah Ta'ala's minimum challenge, including its composition and precision, which is too long to discuss here. If this is so, the Quran contains about 77,000 words. She left out a part of the translation according to one numeration. So there are different schools of thought of counting the words of the Quran. So in the original Arabic, Qadi Iyad, he says, radiallahu anhu, that in the Quran there are about 77,000 words according to one, way that it is counted. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, we have given you the kawthar, consists of 10 words. The Quran is therefore divided into more than 77,000 parts, meaning the 77,000 divided by 10, each of which is a miracle in itself. So I told you this is a treat. This is like Qadi Iyad, you're really seeing like how the man thinks. Like this guy's very, very scholarly. Its miraculous nature, as has already been stated, has 2 aspects. The manner of its eloquence, what we call al-balagha, and the method of its composition. Because the Quran is not like any other book. It's not like poetry, it's not like prose, it's its own category. It's the Quran. Each of these parts therefore consists two miracles, and in this way the number is doubled. So if you look at the rhetoric of the Quran, it's 7,000 pieces of miracles, that's what he's saying. And then if you look at the composition, it's 7,000. So it's 14,000. So he's trying to show you the immense amount of miracle of the Quran. Then it has aspects of a miraculous nature, which involve reports about the knowledge of the unseen. A single surah will report about many things of the unseen, and each report is a miracle in itself. So the number is multiplied yet again. Then there are the other miraculous aspects which we mentioned, which multiply the total yet again. This is only in respect to the Quran, and therefore the number of its miracles alone cannot really be fixed, and its proofs cannot be encompassed. So just to give you a sense of what that means, there's another aspect which he doesn't mention, which is the Quran, we say, is Allah Ta'ala's speech. Okay? Allah Ta'ala's speech, like all of Allah Ta'ala's traits, is outside of time. So every time you read the Quran, it's as if it's being revealed for the first time. So every time you read the Fatiha, it's like a new Fatiha, it's a new recitation of the Fatiha. So the miracles are never ending, because every time somebody reads even if you read Surah Al-Ikhlas, from morning to sunset, every recitation of Surah Al-Ikhlas is a new recitation, it's a new miracle. So the Quran is this never-ending book of miracles that honestly we are very, very blessed, alhamdulillah, to be the people of the Quran, inshallah. We ask Allah to make us the people of the Quran. The hadiths and traditions from the Prophet ﷺ about these matters, which we have pointed out, can do no more than give an indication about the miraculous aspects of his life. The second aspect is the clarity of his miracles. The messengers in the past are given miracles in accordance with the interests of their people at the time and the science in which their generation excelled. So for example, at the time of Musa ﷺ, magic was the greatest science of the people. Musa was sent to them with a miracle which resembled their own claim to power. What he brought broke their normal patterns and was beyond their power, so their magic was rendered powerless. It was the same in the time of Isa alayhi salam. The fullest science of his people was medicine. Therefore, something was presented to them which they could not do, and he confronted them with what was beyond their normal bounds of medicine, like bringing the dead to life. I mean, a good doctor can heal you, but no doctor can bring the dead back to life. So same thing with like Musa, like bringing the dead back to life, curing the blind and the leper without any treatment or medicine. So he said, I bring back the dead to life, I heal the leper by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without the treatment or medicine. It was the same with the miracles of all of the prophets alayhim salam. When Allah Ta'ala sent Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the pinnacle of the sciences and knowledge of the Arabs consisted in four things: rhetoric, al-balagha, poetry, traditions, meaning the ansab or the history of the lineage of the Arabs or the lineage of the horses or whatever they were documenting, and traditions of their forebears and divination. They were very superstitious, as we've talked about before. Then Allah Ta'ala sent down the Quran on him to go beyond the bounds of these four categories with pure Arabic, impossibility of imitation, and eloquence beyond their linguistic norms. It has a strange composition and an extraordinary style whose method of composition they were unaware of. They were unable to recognize it amongst the styles of the different meters. It contained reports about beings, events, secrets, hidden things, and inner thoughts, and these were found to be the case and were reported to be sound and true, no matter how hostile the critic. Right? So no critic of the Prophet ﷺ proved him wrong. They just didn't believe, but no one challenged him and was successful in their challenge. I lost my place, 1 second. He invalidated divination, which was only true one time out of 10. Like, should I go this way or that way? And then you throw the arrows, I'll go this way. That's what he means. It's like they say in English, a broken clock is right twice a day. He brought reports about past generations, news of the previous prophets, vanished nations, and events which were beyond the scope even of those who devoted themselves exclusively to the study of this knowledge. We have already made the miraculous aspects of these things clear. This miracle of the Quran, combined as it does all of the miraculous aspects we have already mentioned, will remain firm until the day of rising, providing a clear proof for every future community, inshallah. The ramifications of this cannot be kept from anyone who investigates it and reflects on its incomparability and what it reports concerning unseen things. No age or time has passed without its truthfulness being made abundantly manifest by what it says. Faith is renewed and the proof is clearly displayed. Hearing is not the same as seeing with one's eyes. Witnessing further increases certainty. The soul's trust is raised from the knowledge of certainty to the vision of certainty. All of it is true. Every generation we find more meaning in the Quran. It's not like we come to a generation and be like, oh, the Quran was wrong, or it doesn't happen. Every generation we say, subhanallah, there's another way to understand this verse. And then, you advance, oh, subhanallah, there's another way to understand this verse, so on and so forth. All of the miracles of the other messengers have passed away with them when they died. Right, so this is another thing about the Quran, is it's the living miracle of Islam. It's the living miracle of the Prophet ﷺ. All of the miracles of the other messengers have passed away with them when they died, ceasing to exist when their source no longer existed. But the great miracle of our Prophet ﷺ will never cease nor come to an end. Its signs are continually renewed and do not vanish. This is what the Prophet ﷺ indicated in the words related by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that he said, every prophet was given signs of a kind that other people believe. I have been given revelation which Allah revealed to me. I hope that I will be the one with the most followers on the day of rising. This is the meaning of the hadith according to some scholars, and it is evident and strong, inshallah. Certain ulama believe that the interpretation of this particular hadith and the manifestation of the miracle of our Prophet has a deeper meaning than its mere manifestation as revelation and speech, in which imagination, trickery, and false deduction are not possible. In these miracles of other messengers, the recalcitrant try to seek out things which they can use to make weak people doubtful about them, like when the sorcerers cast the ropes and staffs and they ceased to change into snakes and other things which sorcerers used to bedazzle people. So the sorcerers, the magicians at the time of Musa alayhi salam, they tried to challenge Musa alayhi salam. The Quran consists of words without any tricks, magic, or illusion in any part of it. For this reason, people find it clearer than other miracles. Just as a poet or an orator is not properly a poet or an orator simply by devising some trick or pretense. The first interpretation is clear and more satisfying. The second interpretation is somewhat obtrusive and disregarded. There is a third aspect which on the school of the Sarfa, which is a sect of the Mu'tazilites and the Shia. I'm bringing a surah, okay. Who said that the people were diverted from bringing something like it. They said that man has the capacity to respond to the challenge, but was diverted from doing so. So in this opinion, which is not an orthodox opinion, they're saying it is possible to imitate the Quran, but we have been prevented from imitating the Quran. So Qadi Iyad is, obviously that doesn't make any sense. It's impossible because it's Allah's speech. How can you imitate Allah's speech? And so the challenge in the Quran is open to imitate the Quran. According to one of the two positions accepted by the Sunnah, bringing something like the Quran is something that lies within human capacity, but no one has brought its like either before or since, because Allah Ta'ala did not give them the power nor make them capable of doing it. There is a clear difference between the two positions, but in both cases, the Arabs abandoned what was in their power to bring or what lay within their capacity to do, even though that meant enduring affliction, evacuation, capture, abasement, a changed situation, loss of life and property, rebuke, reproach, being rendered incapable, intimidation, and threat. It is this that constitutes the clearest sign of their incapacity to bring something like it and their inability to rise to the challenge. They were prevented from it even though it was within their capacity to do so. This is what Imam Abu al-Ma'ali al-Juwayni, Imam al-Juwayni is Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni is Imam al-Ghazali's Shaykh. This is what al-Juwayni and others believe. He said, this is our opinion. This, in our opinion, is a more conclusive form of breaking of norms than actions which are marvelous in themselves. Meaning, the fact that the Quran is standing all of this time and no one can imitate it, no one can stump it, is more of a miracle than Musa alayhi salam causing his stick to turn into a snake. That's what he's trying to say. It's like a never-ending challenge at each moment for the last 1500 years that no one can live up to. Anyone who sees such a thing immediately thinks that it was one of the gifts of a master of magic because of his greater knowledge of the art and superior knowledge. This is what he thinks until sound investigation refutes that it is by his own power. As for the challenge that has been made to people over hundreds of years to bring something like the Quran, they have not done so. Even though the pretenders have gone to every length to answer the challenge, they have been unsuccessful because Allah Ta'ala has prevented creatures from doing this. It is as if a prophet were to say, my sign is that Allah Ta'ala will stop people from standing up, although it is in their power to do so, and they are not ill. If that happened and Allah had made them incapable of standing up, that would have been one of the most radiant signs and clearest proof success is by Allah. So it's a continual challenge. Okay, make up something like the Quran. It's there, we read it all the time, but no one has been able, and no one will be able to. One of the ulama did not grasp the superiority of the prophets. And by the way, that's why people that attack Islam theologically, they don't attack the Quran. They attack the Prophet ﷺ, or Islamic history, or seerah. But you will not find people that will attack the Quran. Very, very rarely will you find that. Like amongst the Orientalists and things like that. Very, very rare. Because they can't. It's something that you can't approach. One of the ulama did not grasp the superiority of the Prophet's sign over the signs of all of the Anbiya, and had to posit an excuse for it in the fineness of the Arabs' understanding, their mental acumen and intellect, making them able to perceive the miracle of the Quran through their perspicacity. What is that word? What you said. From his point of view, the Prophet brought them the Quran because of their fine perception. Other people like the Copts, the Christians of Egypt, Banu Israel and others did not have this quality. They were dense and stupid, having been rendered thus by Pharaoh, who made them accept that he was their Lord, so that the Samurai, or the head of the magicians, was able to make them accept what he foisted on them about the calf after they had, Samurai amongst the Bani Israel, who foisted upon them about what they believed about the calf after they had believed in Allah. Others of them worshipped the Messiah in spite of agreeing that he had been crucified, although in fact Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, they did not crucify him or kill him, it was only a likeness they were shown. We do not believe in the crucifixion. Musa brought these people clear signs which were evident to them and which they did not doubt even though their understanding was coarse. In spite of all this, they still said, quoting the Quran, we will not believe you until we see Allah Ta'ala openly. They were not content with the manna and quail, manna wa salwa, and exchanged that which was better for what was base. The Arabs, in spite of their ignorance, were more prone to recognize their maker. They sought nearness to Allah Ta'ala through idols. Some of them believed in Allah Ta'ala alone before the messenger came by following their intellects and by the purity of their hearts. So there were these Unitarian amongst the pagan Arabs at the time. Not many, but they existed. When the messenger brought them the book of Allah Ta'ala, they grasped its wisdom, its miracles, its miraculous nature was clear to them immediately by virtue of their superior perception. They believed him and they were increased every day in belief. They abandoned the world entirely in his company and immigrated from their houses and property. They killed their fathers and sons in order to help him, meaning in battle. Things of a similar meaning have come whose truth shines through and whose beauty astonishes when it is proven and verified. But we have already clarified our Prophet's miracle and its manifestation in a way which spares us from having to embark on its inner and outward paths. I seek help with Allah, He is enough and the best guardian. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Okay, so this concludes the first part of the book. And then the next part is about the rights which people owe the Prophet ﷺ, which inshallah in our next class we'll get into that. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Any questions? Naam. What is what? It's the story behind Surah Al-Jinn. It happened at night that the Prophet ﷺ approached a group of jinn and he taught them the Quran. And the story is the background of Surah Al-Jinn. No. This is a story from the Seerah. So Imam Rifai will teach you how to talk to the jinn on the trip. That's on him. Mm.
Christians in Madinah, they migrated or they converted?
A mix. There were more Jews than Christian. There were about 19 Jewish tribes in Medina. Some of them remained, but the main Jewish tribes were expelled after the problem of Bani Qurayda and whatnot, and Khaybar. They were expelled and they went north to the Levant. So some remained, but the majority left. Some, no, the ones that remained, eventually they converted.
Participated in that.
Mukhayraq.
Yes.
Mukhayraq.
Yes. Rabbi,
Mukhayraq Khairul Yahud. The Prophet ﷺ said he is the best of the Jews because when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, it was only one. When the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina and he drafted the constitution of Medina, part of the articles of that constitution was common defense, common civil defense. So when the Quraysh were going to attack, the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, well, we have to now defend Medina, and the Jewish tribes reneged. And only Mukhayraq came, and he fought and he died. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Mukhayraq Khairul Yahud. He is the best amongst the Jews.
Sheikh Tarek, I have a question about the shadow of the Prophet.
Okay.
I don't know, for some reason it always fascinated. I heard from a scholar, I think it's Habib Rahman bin Hafid, but I'm not sure. He said that the reason that there are conflicting reports about him having a shadow is because some of the Sahaba were of such a stature that they could witness and see the light of the Prophet ﷺ, and his light over the shadow eliminated the shadow. And so those that saw the shadow were the people who couldn't witness the nur of the Prophet ﷺ, and those that didn't see the shadow, it's because that light eliminated the shadow. I thought it was very compelling. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a valid interpretation. That's one interpretation, and the other way we were taught is that it's just that he had different ahwal, he had different, different tajalliyat, different, manifestations. I mean, both of them are fine, but the point of the story, there's 2 points of the story. Number one is that we don't have to negate anything that we have, and number two is that we always seek to reconcile when we have what are quote unquote conflicting reports. So this is an example, or that's another example of how to reconcile what might appear like conflicting reports. Like, for example, an easier one is the Prophet ﷺ, his hair. Sometimes he had no hair, sometimes he had long hair, sometimes he had braided hair. What is it? Well, you're different. Sometimes he cut his hair, sometimes he didn't. When he went to do Hajj, he shaved his hair, etc. So that's how you have to reconcile those reports. It doesn't mean that one is right and the others are wrong. So this is an example of that. But that's a good interpretation.
It wasn't my own.
No, the ulama say that he himself had a light. We all have the light of faith, but there was something else about the Prophet ﷺ. The Sahaba, they said when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, it's like the light, there was a light in Medina, and when he passed, that light went away. So there was something physical that they observed in his presence, ﷺ. So we would be a little bit more verbatim when it comes to that. It's not like it means he had a lot of faith. Of course he had faith, but no, this was like there was something about him, about his physical presence, in which there was a light that came that we did not observe in other people.
take that ayah was sirajan munira.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a reference to the Prophet ﷺ. وَدَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ بِإِذْنِهِ وَسِرَاجًا مُنِيرًا. So he is an illuminated light. And as a matter of fact, the ulama say that all of the references to light in the Quran are references to the Prophet ﷺ. So some of our mashayikh, when they would read the verse of light, ayat an-nur, they would say, وَيَهْدِ اللَّهُ لِنُورِهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ مَا يَشَاءُ. At the end of the verse, that Allah guides to His light, meaning Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whom He wills. So if you follow that theme in the Quran, you will see that all of the references to Allah's light is also a reference to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Yeah, but he was created as a light first. Yeah, that's another thing altogether. But yeah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
Isa alayhi salam was he was able to bring dead back to life. What about Prophet Muhammad? Did he have the such miracle?
I think there is a narration. I think we read it. It was just a brief reference, but I think there is that story. The exact story doesn't come to me right now, but I'm pretty sure we read it. Okay, we're off for the next 2 weeks. Okay, so this is we're off for the next 2 weeks. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everyone, inshallah. We'll pick it up. I'm traveling, so the next time we have class, it will be online, which will be, well, we'll announce it. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But not the 5th? Okay, well, I'll get back to you because I think the 5th I'm out of town in my travel out of town. Anyway, we'll continue. The next few weeks will be online, inshallah. We'll pick up where we left off. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli afdala salatin ala as'adi makhluqatika Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون.